said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
That is Lord, they say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
I encountered an article not too long ago with the tagline, "The internet does not hate women, people hate women, and the internet allows them to do it faster, harder, and with impunity." The article is titled, "Who Does She Think She Is?" Who does Ms. Penny think that she is? She thinks that she's far more significant than she actually is. That's what I think. And ironically, it's exactly this kind of attitude that is toxic to not only the author's own mental health, but is toxic to the emotional well-being of and relationships between the sexes. After a brief and frankly insulting opening vignette in which the author discusses a presumably fictional instance of her talking to a crisis hotline worker about all the angry strangers that she has to deal with on a regular basis, she launches right into another tirade that immediately contradicts the opening tagline, no less. That reads as follows: "The internet hates women. Everyone knows that by now, and nobody precisely approves. But we've reached a point of collective tolerance. It's just the way of the world, and if you can't handle it, honey, delete your account. Stop engaging online, cut yourself off from friends, family, and professional contacts, shut down your business, blow up your social capital, stop learning, stop talking, just stop. Or else." Setting aside the aggressive slippery slope that she's constructed in her insufferable boo-hooing here, let's deconstruct her arguments. The most obvious place to start would be with the claim that the internet hates women, or more broadly, that humanity as a whole hates women. Of course, we're all well aware of just how nonsense this claim is. After all, not only does society bend over backwards to cater to women's whims, often at the expense of men. See, for example, divorce, alimony, and custody laws, reduced punishments and lower prison sentences for the same crimes, the Violence Against Women Act, to name a few of the more obvious ones. But even strictly sticking to the internet, men are more likely than women to be targeted by online harassment. A 2017 study by the Pew Research Center found that 44% of men and 37% of women have been the victim of some form of online harassment. But women were more likely to rate these experiences as a major problem that should be taken more seriously, with significantly more women than men agreeing with the statement that we should feel safe and welcome online, rather than we should feel free to speak our minds online. 63% versus 43%, respectively. While I have no doubt in my mind that some of these individuals have faced what could be called the more extreme forms of harassment, such as doxing or having someone threaten to come and find them in real life, and I don't really begrudge these people for feeling like these scenarios ought to be taken more seriously, the author of this original article clearly doesn't fit in this same category. After all, the first few examples that she provides of her supposed harassment are not at all in the same vein as what I just provided. Heck, 3 out of the 5 don't even use naughty language. The first one? Another day at the Telegraph and another attack on Laurie Penny. I know you'll surely need a moment to recover from the sting of that biting commentary, but the fact that she begins her article with this particular example would seem unusually lucid if it weren't followed by the paranoid screed that it was. It seems very likely that Ms. Penny would belong to that 63% of women believing that people should have the right to feel safe on the internet, given that she seems personally affronted by the idea that she might have to take some responsibility for her own internet comfort. The way she sardonically dances from stop engaging online all the way into shutting down your business, as though this is the logical conclusion, speaks to a certain level of overreacting that has become unfortunately common as of late. So, her overreaction to relatively innocuous comments, no doubt of the "don't tell me to block people, tell them not to harass me" school of thought, leads her to see online harassment as much more of a serious problem than it probably is. Suddenly, one person on 4chan, a place well known for its civilized and intelligent discussion, calling you a nasty name is not just someone being an edgelord, but an indication of a greater societal problem. A societal problem that transcends the online world, no less. Never mind the fact that said 4chan poster probably moseyed on over to Poll or R9K immediately after their post about you and called some other stranger a bundle of sticks. You've got a victimhood narrative to spin. Take the statement, "We've reached a point of collective tolerance," when talking about the supposed hatred of women online. Now is where we start reaching the point where this line of thinking begins to affect men as well. Let me explain. Ms. Penny and others like her use this overreactionary belief that all men hate women to begin pointing fingers and saying, "See, this is a male problem. It's men who have to change." She first says that all people in general hate women, but she makes enough male distinctions in the article to know who her real target is here. That, and you just know that she sees the women who support men as brainwashed traitors. But I digress. This belief festers in her mind and colors the way that she, and others who think like her, see all future interactions with men. The problem with this is, now it doesn't matter whether someone is legitimately criticizing her, telling her she's bringing her problems on herself, or telling her that she's a whore that needs to die choking on cocks. All of these things are apparently equally hateful in her mind. Putting aside the fact that the reason that she gets so much online hatred is probably because she's insufferable, not because she's a woman. Her line of logic doesn't exactly give men a lot of direction in which they ought to try and change and improve, now does it? So not only do we have a lot of women taking Ms. Penny's ideas and running with them, assuming that largely innocuous comments are more serious than they ought to be taken, which leads them only to further distrust men both online and offline, but now we also have a lot of men who are essentially being told that no matter what you do, you probably hate women and you probably should work on that. How? By treating women like equals? Obviously not. By offering polite criticism? Are you kidding? That would be misogyny. By simply deciding that the only way to win is not to play at all? Look at how much you hate women. You can't even stand to be around them. So, as you can see, this line of thinking really has no constructive endpoint. Women go on assuming that everyone hates them, men go on having no idea how they can possibly change, wondering why or if they ought to even bother, and with many of them sadly going as far as to consider whether the world might simply be better off without them. And overall, relations between the sexes continue to go down the crapper. Today, we're going to talk critically about this whole scenario. Why are people like this perfectly content to sit and complain, to tear everything around them down without providing a constructive alternative or a new direction to go as a replacement? Why is the onus being placed solely on men to do the changing to suit people like Ms. Penny's delicate, incoherent, and contradictory sensibilities? What is the mental health fallout for men when they hear messages like this from women like Laurie Penny? What suggestions can we make to both men and women to improve their online experiences and emotional well-being? All this and more on tonight's episode of Men's Mental Health.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another edition of Men's Mental Health. I'm your host, the most pleasant ghost, the Prim Reaper. Joining me for this episode is the one true leader of Badger kind, Allison, and the ever-lovely and alluring Anna Cherry. The topic that we're here to discuss today is sort of a multi-purpose one. It combines all the problems that come along with women worsting, overusing the word harassment, a massively engorged ego, and the unreasonable demands that those with said ego tend to place on men. And make no mistake, the burden to change is certainly and disproportionately placed upon men. So that being said, I think that we've got a lot to talk about, and so I will open the floor to my two co-hosts to select whichever topic suits their fancy to tear into first. Ladies?
Oh, pick me!
Well, go! We picked you!
Yay, thank you. Silence is a yes. Oh no, don't take me at my word there. Let me rephrase that. All right, no. So I really like to talk about something I recently read. And a Uncanny Vulvas was the name of the article, and it's by an evolutionary psychologist who is a woman. Her name is Diana Fleischman. And one of the taglines I really took away from it, was that men who get evolutionary cues that they are dead ends disproportionately menace society. Meaning, the problem that Laurie Penny is describing, let's pretend it exists. Let's say that it is as bad as she says, and that it is just on every corner, and it's the worst thing ever. Well, it seems like treating men the way we have been treating them as a society is what's causing that problem. Men who feel like they're not useful, not good, evolutionary dead ends, they don't have any partners. Incels, for instance, people who have recently been maligned in the media in just the past few days because of the recent van attack in Canada, I believe. So these people who deserve empathy, compassion, understanding of their situation, how we're treating them is actually causing the problem that we are experiencing. So I understand that Laurie herself has tweeted things that please stop forcing me to empathize with monsters. I know plenty of nerds who, never do anything. They would never hurt a fly. They're just the most best people. And so don't ask me to empathize with monsters. Well, maybe because you're not empathizing with them, you think that they're monsters in the first place. And secondly, maybe your lack of empathy is what is causing them to be monsters in the first fucking place.
Well said.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Anna. I mean, you don't have to say in any way that it's ridiculous to even have to say that you don't support someone doing something violent at all. But at the same time, the fact is that this community, the incel community, which is not an ideology, the only way you can get rid of incels, mainstream media, is if you get them laid. It's not an ideology, it's a state of being. It's called involuntary celibacy for a reason, because it's not chosen. But you can have compassion for people, for mostly men, who feel so socially isolated and ostracized, and they're experiencing negative health implications of that social ostracization and isolation. You can feel compassion for being in that situation if indeed this individual who engaged in this attack was in that category, which we don't even, it's not really that clear if it was the case. This may have been a prank to associate the incel community with this individual. But it's like, of course, people who I use an example. I take it out of the realm of the human race, and I use an example of another animal species, domesticated animal species, horses. For the longest time, human beings, when they had domesticated the horse, they had actually allowed stallions to just live out their lives with their herds alongside the communities that humans had. And then in about the 1600s, they started to be very concerned about the bloodlines of horses. So they started to breed them with an eye to creating certain types of breeds. At that time, they started to put stallions in stalls so that they could control which stallions actually bred with the mares, and every other male horse they would geld. What came out of that practice, when you take a social animal out of its social milieu, out of its natural social habitat, and you isolate it in a box, it goes a bit sideways, shall we say. It gets violent, it gets aggressive. And then after generations and generations and generations of doing this to stallions, to putting them inside boxes, stallions got a reputation for being violent and aggressive. However, when you raise a stallion in a stallion's proper situation, in a social situation, in the herd, stallions are just another horse. So this toxic stallioninity that people talk about is not actually a biological feature of being a stallion. It's a situation of how they're treated, and a result of their isolation. And if you don't give a social animal social outlets, it goes a little sideways. And for the most part, most incels will never, ever, ever, ever be violent. Ever. They'll just suffer in silence. And if they ever are violent, they're much more likely to take their own lives. So not being able to extend sympathy to an individual who did become violent is understandable. But I doubt Laurie Penny ever extended sympathy to the groups of men experiencing the kind of social isolation that makes them go sideways. And, you know, in one out of a million of them makes them do something violent towards another person.
And I'm sorry, in my experience, people frequently do not have empathy for others when they themselves have not suffered.
Oh, totally. I mean, honestly, the people that I see criticizing incels most commonly that I know personally are those in like happy relationships. They've never had to suffer the problem of being an involuntary celibate. It's like they have no idea what it's like. They think that these people, oh, you know, they're just losers. They can do something to improve their situation or whatever. They're just so entitled to women's bodies, and, you know, they should stop being so entitled because they're just obviously misogynists, right? But I can understand being upset about like some people expressing like, oh, you know, to heck with all women because I can't get laid or whatever. I can see how that would be maybe tough to empathize with, but you know, you kind of have to look behind what these people are saying. Like, people say all kinds of things when they're angry. That doesn't necessarily mean
say they hate their parents and, you know, things like that.
Exactly,
and
right?
On top of that, I personally, in my experience as a neuropsychologist, have, and in life experience, have learned that anger, especially in men, and just in general, anger invariably comes from some sort of pain, some sort of trauma, slight, perceived or otherwise, some sort of something, some thorn in a person's side that they're, especially in particular in men. And it is so difficult to see the pain behind the anger because you're so focused on this angry visage, and it's really easy to react to that with a visceral pushing away and disgust and looking down on that anger, and it's so much harder to put aside those instantaneous instinctual emotions and look deeper into what that person may be experiencing and what may be the cause of their pain. And another really interesting thing too is what we're talking about here in voluntary celibacy, which is, you know, a sexual situation. And I notice in my experience as a neuropsychologist in life, and as well as reading the chat that is happening here on YouTube as we're talking about this, it is loneliness that men do not abide the most. It is loneliness that hurts the most. It is the lack of companionship. It is that evolutionary dead end. It's not about sex. It is about having a partner. It's also about sex, sure, but most of the time the real pain, the real sort of thing that pushes towards suicide is loneliness. And even further, if you know, us liberals, if we're gonna and Laurie Penny and the likes who
hey, I am too.
All right. Well, if liberals are going to talk, all right, let's talk about progressives. If progressives are going to talk about redistribution of wealth, which yes, I'm all about, what happened to redistribution of sexuality? How come that's a different topic? I mean, we're talking about a thing from which people suffer: lack of wealth, lack of sex. It is a painful, physical, visceral situation. So how come we're so cool about redistributing wealth, but we're so against redistributing sex?
How to get French honey badger upset right there, but
roll in the super chats. Let's debate, baby.
let's keep it on topic for now. We'll stick with the distribution of sex or the loneliness, and I think that you're really onto the right topic there. Like, honestly, loneliness is a big deal. Like, we are a social species. Like, a lot of people will say, you know, I'm totally cool with being alone. I'm good with being alone. But, you know, when you think about somebody who's, say, an introvert, even introverts need that human contact. They're not just sitting alone in their basement 24/7 and they're being totally cool with that. They're going to work, they're meeting up with other people, they're having, lunches with their friends, they're having chances to express that social outlook, right? They're not just sitting all alone, but a lot of incels, they really are lacking a lot of those social outlets that a lot of other people have, right? So, it's really not that difficult to empathize with them, to be like, okay, if I were in that situation, like, I would feel pretty messed up. Like, I can just think about it. If I were, like, I've seen people talk that they said they've been alone for 10 to 15 years. I can't
That's
even...
the thing. I don't think feminists really, or, those people who talk about these things, I don't think they've ever actually experienced that. I think they're so blind to their privilege and how much everybody upholds their view and gives them things and actually creates a society for them to live super comfortably. And they're never alone. There are always feminist groups out there who are not getting shut down, who are not getting run off of Reddit, who are not being discriminated against. So they do not understand. They cannot empathize because they've never truly been alone. A lot of us here, us girls, we've been social outcasts because we're not exactly like other girls in a lot of ways. We're not part of the feminist clique of girlfriends. That's not. So we've actually experienced social isolation. We can't empathize. But I truly doubt that a lot of the feminists that we currently see spewing vitriol, or such closed-minded lack of empathy like Laurie, I truly believe she has never, ever, ever experienced suffering of the lonely type. And it's so easy to look down on that which you have not experienced. It triggers this thing in us as humans, as primates, as animals. We stay away from those who are diseased. We quarantine ourselves from those who are diseased physically. And same goes for mentally. When somebody walks funny, when somebody is talking to themselves, when somebody is exhibiting abnormal mental behavior, what do? We stay the fuck away from them. So it is very difficult, I think, for them to empathize because of also this visceral reaction to the pain and dysfunction of others.
I just wanted to point something out about Laurie Penny and how I can sort of corroborate what Anna is saying about her, that it's doubtful that she's experienced this depth and level of loneliness and despair. And it's the simple fact is she talks about the harms done to her and her victimhood and her vulnerability. And she talks about them. And in talking about them, she's demonstrating that she has a belief that people will care. People who are truly experience social isolation, and this is something that I know from my own life, people who truly experience social isolation never get a sense that their vulnerabilities are of interest to anyone, that anyone will care that they're being bullied. And that entire novel that Laurie Penny wrote, and it was a novel, I'm read about halfway through, and then at that point I'm like, this is just repeating all of it. It's just details in excruciating detail, all of the things that she expects people to care about. And like I said, as a person who has experienced extreme social isolation, and I'm not going to compare myself to the involuntary celibate because I know that there's some structural factors that make them very different than a woman experiencing extreme isolation. I never got the sense that people would care about how things are affecting me, about how I'm harmed or vulnerable. And I actually developed severe phobias around vulnerability because I never thought that anybody would care about me being vulnerable. They wouldn't care enough to take care of me when I felt bad or in pain or sick. And Laurie Penny, I don't even think she's aware of the massive amount of entitlement and privilege that she's revealing just by being so extensive and detailed about her vulnerabilities and her so-called victimhood, because she's revealing that she knows on some level that people will care, and people who have experienced extreme social isolation have no trust that people will care about their vulnerabilities. So I just wanted to put that out there as a confirmation of what Anna is saying, that it's pretty obvious that Laurie Penny has never really experienced extreme social isolation. And part of the reason why she hasn't experienced extreme social isolation is, one, she is female, and two, she's very gender typical. I mean, let's be honest, Laurie, and to the people listening, you guys, this is a woman who very easily slips into the role of being socially valued, of expressing vulnerability with the expectation that someone, a man or a woman, is going to come by and say, hey, we care about you. We value you. Look at all this conversation about you're being bullied. We care. We want to do something about it. That is a very gender normative expression of femaleness that Laurie Perry's got going on. So she is not just availing herself of female privilege, the privilege that society gives women to give them value by virtue of just their biology, and that's right in the word woman. A woman is a woman. She has a positive social identity in the word woman by virtue of attaining female adult body. Not so with man. Man, you have to do additional things to have value. You have to be a man. You have to be a real man. You got to be stoic. You got to sacrifice for others. So she has that privilege as a biological female. And then she has additional privilege as a gender normative biological female that she doesn't, I don't even think she realizes. And that one thing that makes her gender normative, it isn't liking pink or having long hair or knitting or doing any feminine of these sort of feminine trappings. Those are minimal when it comes to gender normative behavior. What makes Laurie Penny truly gender normative as a woman, not just cisgendered, but also gender normative, not just cissexual, but also gender normative, what makes her truly gender normative as a woman is her comfort with playing the victim. That is the primary female role in our society. And she does it to a T. So just putting that out there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm admitting my ignorance a little. This is the first time I've ever encountered anything written or said by Laurie Penny. And I just felt my stomach twisting the whole way through what she was reading, because all of it just smacked of that victimhood that you were talking about just now. It's like she's talking like she has zero control over her life, and how everybody hates me. Oh, woe is me. I'm so terrible. I'm so terribly off because the entire world just hates women. But like you were saying, a lot of the times women don't have this same social loneliness that a lot of these incel men have, because they have people ready to jump to their defense. They have people saying, oh, we'll help you out. We want to help women be in a better position. This is just common across society. You can see it in the way that people are reacting. Oh my goodness, women are paid 3 cents less than men on average, if we're being honest about the wage, the pay difference thing that's not really a real thing, that's been debunked several times over again. But if we're being honest about it, people are still like, oh, what can we do? What can we do to improve this? How can we work to improve women's standing? So her argument in this article that women are hated by society, it just doesn't fly with me. It doesn't make any sense. Also, I wanted to kind of dial it back just one real quick moment here, just to mention something that I'd kind of forgotten to before. But it's funny that these guys are the very sorts of types to complain about incels being angry, but in the same breath they'll be like, oh, men should feel free to express their emotions. I guess we can kind of see how truthful that really is. You're allowed to express your
approved emotions.
Exactly. Yeah, you're okay to express emotions as long as they're ones that we're okay with, as long as they're ones that perhaps we might even be able to use to exploit our own kind of goals here, Why not?
What are the approved emotions? Anger, nope. Sadness,
no. Acting like
nope.
a girl, liking pink, and I honestly don't know how to put it into words, but being a woman, I guess, is the best way.
Not acting like a girl, but not actually acting like you have any vulnerabilities as a man.
Well, yeah, because you're never going to understand what women go through because you're a privileged man, right? So Obviously, it doesn't work that way, but at the same time, you're not allowed to express your emotions as you experience them as a man, because that's the patriarchy and that's toxic masculinity, and you can't do that, right? It just kind of, spirals down into this really negative circle, and you can really see that in a lot of what she's written in this article. Just pulling it up here, like this first section, it bothers me personally as somebody who has volunteered and who works at a crisis hotline. She's talking about, it's a clammy summer night, you're 24, you call a suicide hotline. The nice lady who answers is probably in her 70s. She's very understanding as you explain to her that hundreds of people, thousands of strangers, are saying awful things about you, that some of them seem to really want to hurt you, and you don't know why. You're just a writer, and you didn't expect this, but some of them tell you in detail their fantasies of your rape and murder. Even though, like I said...
Guess what? She's telling them her fantasies of emotional rape and murder, so shoes on the other foot, bitch.
Yeah, like I wasn't kidding in my intro here. That bitch is a whore that needs to die choking on cocks. This is from 4chan. What else are you going to expect from 4chan? And the first one is another day at the Telegraph and another attack on Laurie Penny. That one is perfectly civilized. It's not an insult. It's just a commentary of her work, and she is still lumping it in the same category as this second comment here. It doesn't matter which way you approach her. You're a terrible person, especially if you're a man, because presumably, I'm assuming
she can't handle criticism.
Well,
let's get right down to it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other criticisms I saw was you're a waste of oxygen. And also, this woman is a whore who should die choking on dicks. Yeah. Isn't that like really passive aggressive? He's not saying, or he or she is not saying that he or she is going to supply the dicks. They're just saying that, should it happen that this happens to you, they would not shed a tear. And it's interesting because, to be honest, I'm of the impression, at least about myself, that the average stranger doesn't really need to care about me. So if I were a whore that died from choking on dicks, I would assume that, Joe Schmo in Tallahassee wouldn't have to shed a tear over me. But Laurie Penny is extremely offended by the thought that there's somebody in the world who doesn't care if she dies. Well, Laurie Penny, there are probably 9.99999 billion people who do not care if you die. And some of them will care enough to tell you that they don't care if you die. Get over it. Yeah. You're not actually entitled for strangers to care about whether or not you live or die. And this is something that I think this individual and other individual women who complain about these passive-aggressive quote-unquote death threats, which are not, they're basically just saying, I don't care if you die. That's all they're doing. Well, somebody says, I don't care if you die to me. I'm like, well, join the indifference club, except you are at least caring enough to tell me that you don't care. So, I mean, I'm not, thank you. You care a little bit there. You care a little bit.
And, another point is, who did people care about who lived or died? Oh, Princess Diana, somebody who was doing things for the people and showed a true feminine side of caring, compassion, love for their neighbor. Mother Teresa, other people, other women. There are actually women that groups of humans, vast generations of humans have cared about and been sad about them dying. And who were those people? Not feminist critics. So maybe take some responsibility for your words and the attitude and the ideas that you're putting out there, Laurie.
Well, yeah, no kidding, right? Like, it's as though she expects to be able to say whatever she wants, and everybody has to act like it's coming on high from the great Laurie Penny, and we should all totally appreciate her words and daren't you criticize her for anything she might have to say. And if you criticize her, she's going to break down crying. And it doesn't matter if what you say is perfectly civil and you're not swearing, you're not saying anything mean, you're just saying, you could be doing this better. It doesn't matter if you're saying that or if you're telling her that she's a whore that needs to die choking on cocks, which anonymous 4chan user probably does not actually advocate that. They're probably just being an edgelord on 4chan like you do. And even if they were actually advocating for it, they're certainly not making an actual credible threat saying, I'm going to come and get you and you're going to choke on my cocks, or I'm going to get other people to do it. They're just making an edgy comment. That's the way it works.
I mean, to be fair, though, she did bring up a point where you do have hundreds of people, thousands sometimes, of people online not liking you. That is an emotional impact. That is something that, especially someone who has been socially comforted throughout their life and has always had sort of a group of girlfriends or whoever, feminists backing them up. It can be extremely unsettling, especially if she doesn't have a support system, which she likely doesn't have a loving relationship that she's in. So because of that, it can get very daunting and scary. And you could, not necessarily fear for your life in a very direct, like, oh my God, Jason is coming out at me with a knife. But there is a subconscious, your amygdala gets activated. You feel social stress. You feel social pain. You're feeling that isolation of knowing that people are not liking you. Sort of kind of like what incels and men go through every day. So,
oh
Laurie,
so
it is a valid point that she is experiencing pain, social pain, emotional pain, which is a result of her unrelenting attack on men and other women. So once again, take responsibility for your words, bitch.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness. There we go.
Oh yeah, she actually has a post up on nerd entitlement. And so she's talking about lonely nerds who say that they aren't privileged. And here's the thing. And one of the reasons why I have difficulty having sympathy for Laurie Penny, saying somebody who's privileged, who's experiencing this kind of, and to be frank, Laurie, there's no way that men experience the privilege of having their vulnerabilities cared about like you do, because nobody is going to pay for a man to write a novel on a website. I think the New Statesman, was it? Or no, it wasn't the New Statesman. It was another site. Nobody's going to pay for a man to write a novel on the website about how he's hurting. They're not. Because that men experience the social isolation of people not caring about their vulnerabilities. This is something you don't experience, Laurie. It's a privilege that you have as a woman, as a gender normative woman as well. And in throwing this idea, telling these young men who are experiencing the extreme pain of social isolation that they're privileged. This is something that she does. And that is actually abusing and harassing them. So the funny thing about Laurie Penny is all of the abuse and harassment that she receives is, of course, done by horrible misogynists. But all of the abuse and harassment that she is ladling out to men around her, and the men that she talks about, is of course part of her political movement and her moral supremacy, which is that just really strikes me. Anyway, so she has this article on nerd entitlement. Do you mind if I just read a little bit of it?
Go for it, yeah.
I did not intend for a moment to minimize Aronson's suffering. Having been a lonely, anxious, horny young person who hated herself and was bullied, I can categorically say that it is an awful place to be. I have seen responses to nerd anti-feminism along the lines of being bullied at school doesn't make you oppressed. Maybe it's not a vector of oppression in the same way, but it's not nothing. It burns. It takes a long time to heal. Feminism, however, is not to blame for making life hell for shy, nerdy men, except where feminism calls them responsible for rape culture, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, and male privilege, which, incidentally, Laurie Penny, are ways of abusing someone. That's, like, all of those are right out of war propaganda. All of those statements are right out of, if you're listening to this, those statements are right out of a war propaganda campaign. So it's okay for Laurie Penny to level those bombs at men, but don't criticize feminism.
Yes.
Well, if you did, you would be taking away her right to do that.
Yeah, she can't take it back because that would be misogyny. But in all kidding aside, she's basically refusing to look inwards and say, okay, maybe I'm saying some things that are really not very nice. They're really not very pleasant to men. They're not giving men any sense of direction in, like, how I think that they would be better if they did other things. And even then, like, as if men should, change themselves to suit Laurie Penny's desires. But that being said, she's not looking inwards in herself and being like, maybe I'm doing some things that are not very nice, and maybe that is why I'm getting so much negative comments. She's saying, no, this is a problem within men. And I guess other women who are not in her ideal progressive social circle, but
non-gender conforming women like us.
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, no, this is a problem within men. This is a problem within society, that we need to change. Because heaven forbid I should be introspective for 5 minutes and think, wow, maybe there's something that I can do to be kind to somebody else, to help somebody else, to understand somebody else's pain, and try to see where they might be coming from. Nope, it's all about me. I don't care about what anybody else has to say. Somebody said something that made me feel bad, and even if it is polite and valid criticism, I don't care. That's unacceptable. I'm perfect.
Well, yeah, part of that is that. And also another thing is that we often get these ideas about how the world is seemingly from the ether, seemingly from just out of space, just download into our brains ideas that have nothing at all to do with reality. In no way are they actually ever witnessed by a single human in reality ever, but they still somehow are carried on. So she has this idea. The reason she doesn't want to listen to anyone else's pain or empathize with anyone else's pain, as she has said multiple times in her Twitter or whatever, is because everybody's already empathizing with men. Well, where, Laurie? Please indulge me, explain to me like I'm 5. Please show me the places on the internet, in reality, what clubs you're talking about, or groups where men and everything's excused for them, where absolutely everything they do is perfect, and it's not just one individual who happens to be your boss or whoever, or your dad, or whatever your problem is, but men, groups, large swaths of men who are forgiven everything. Like, I realized she has an issue with Milo. She wrote a whole thing after the ball of dangerous ideas thing about, her experience being around Milo. And so maybe she's thinking about Milo and how easily he gets forgiven and access to things. Well, he's a gay man. He has a special, pass card. Let's talk about actual straight, cis, normal guys. Like, where is she looking? Laurie, please explain to me. Are you looking at construction workers and that they're whistling and nobody reprimands them? Is that what you're considering to be that men are allowed to do anything and everything? Where is your proof that it is truly the way that you say that men are always empathized with, that male expression of feelings and ideas is always what is valued by the group? What people around you are actually doing this? Please point it out to me.
Well, I mean, and you know what else too? Like, we were kind of also talking about, the experiences being bullied in high school. I was bullied in high school, but you know what? I looked into myself and I was like, okay, maybe I might have done some things that I'm not necessarily proud of. I might have been being maybe less of a good person than I should have been at one certain situation. And even though it sucked at the time, it was a really critical moment into me being able to look into myself and be like, hey, that was not cool, that thing that I did, so I should change this about myself. And I credit that person. And I actually told them about this several years out of high school, and it led to a really great conversation, but I credited them. I said, you are probably one of the major reasons that I wound up trying to work hard to improve myself, because I was able to use that experience to work on myself. So it's like behaving like these experiences coming in on you are like the end of the world. Like, we should now be afraid of everything. We should work hard to try and change society to suit our whims so that we don't ever have to feel uncomfortable. People like Laurie Penny are missing a major opportunity.
Growth opportunity?
Yeah, exactly. They're missing a major opportunity to make those personal improvements on themselves. Because they're not focusing on improving themselves. They're focusing on changing the world. And if they don't change the world, then it's the world that's the problem.
And that's very true. And I definitely have to agree that that can be an issue, and often is, that you feel like you're perfect, or that, it's the world around you that is hurting you. And in fact, that is the argument that Laurie says incels make. And people, feminists, believe that, these guys, these incels who, are having such a hard time, maybe they need to look inward and see where they could be failing and what they can do different. However, when it is their head on the chopping block, well, it's misogyny. So, it's really not equality. But I would like to, I guess, partly play devil's advocate, partly bring something up that, from a psychology perspective, that I don't know what exactly the cause of it is. It could be extremely critical parents, or a histrionic sort of complex in general. But I tend to lean towards having experiences growing up where you were criticized unduly, or in some way had a caregiver who reprimanded and doled out discipline without explaining what it was all for, explaining what was going on, or a disciplinarian who wasn't actually disciplined, who did not punish them when they deserved to be punished for a transgression, but instead waited for these transgressions to pile up until they got pissed off and then punished them. So then a child learns that it is the emotional state of the other person that matters more than what they're doing themselves. So what I'm getting at is that there's this feeling, which I've personally had to overcome in the past, that you feel like any criticism of your behavior is a criticism of your person. And that is an extreme fine line, but it is a really, really crucial one. You can make a world of difference in a person's life if they understand that it is their behavior that is crappy, which is not their fault often. A lot of times we get pre-programmed with a bunch of shit. We live in the world where we have rewards and punishments, so we end up having behaviors that come out of that. Then we have people we watch and imitate, and behaviors that come out of that. And we are loaded with these, toolbars and add-ons and things in our brain software, and often we act out in ways that we don't even necessarily control or would condone. So it is so important to communicate to children and to people that there's a fine line, that there's a huge difference rather between a criticism of their behavior versus a personal attack. The concept of you is your intention, truly. I believe this, and neuroscience backs this up. And you are who you want to be. You are who you're striving to be every day. And so whatever you happen to do, whatever mistake or whatever bad behavior you happen to have done, that does not define you. That happens to be a behavior of you as a person. And those two are vastly separate and different. You can maintain your personhood that is valuable and has potential and has goodness and still do shitty behaviors. And we need to, when we call out shitty behaviors, we need to disassociate that emotional impact from, oh, they think I'm a bad person, they hate me, I feel really terrible now, and realize that it's like, oh no, they're just trying to help me find a better way how to human.
Definitely, and I think that was really well said. And I kind of wanted to bring up one major last thing just before I start getting into some of these super chats. Because, this is at its core a men's mental health show, right? I wanted to talk for a brief moment about what the impact of these kinds of messages can have on men who are maybe internalizing them and thinking, oh man, maybe it is something to do with me. Maybe I should be doing something to change. I just want to say, I don't think so. Don't change yourself to try and suit these kinds of people's whims, because like I said, they're not trying to change the world to be a better place. They're trying to change the world to suit their own whims. They're not going to be satisfied with pretty much anything that you do, because as I showed you in the comments that she was talking about at the top of her article here, it doesn't matter whether you're saying something perfectly nice or saying something profane. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be good enough. Don't even bother to try. What you should be doing is instead focusing on yourself. Focus on your own self-improvement. Think inwards about if there are ways within yourself that you want to try to improve to make yourself feel better. And when you're perusing the internet and you see things like this, it's really important to not internalize these kinds of messages. Like, sure, it's fine to like take legitimate criticisms in yourself. Like we've already discussed, there are legitimate criticisms that we can take, that we can use for self-improvement. But you have to make sure that you're finding these messages from the right place, that the people who are talking to you are coming at it from the right angle. They're not coming at it from a selfish angle of wanting to change you to suit their whims. If people are saying you can change yourself to make yourself more happy, more satisfied, to make yourself a more content and whole human being, then that's fine. Go ahead and use those messages, but just block out this other stuff because it's not going to do anything for your mental health.
Yeah, figure out who you want to be. You know, honestly, it sounds corny as hell, but look, who did you want to be when you were a little kid? What did you, because children are pure until we get to a certain age, until, you know, hormones and societal forces and microcosms that exist in middle school and onward, where we have these complexes as growing humans. We don't know what to do with them and we just vomit them all over each other. Before all that, children, there's a purity of spirit and intent and a different view of the world that we all had as children. So try to remember back to, what did you value? Who were your heroes? Who were the people that inspired you? And then, motherfucker, be like them. Just do that, you know?
Yeah, just thinking back of when I was a kid, you know what I said I wanted to do to my father? Not do my father, but what I wanted to do with my life to my father. I said that I wanted to recreate all of the systems that human beings run under. And he told me, you know, people would probably not survive that. And that gave me a lot to think about. That was a legitimate criticism there, Dad. But I just wanted to say, when you're looking for things, when you're looking for standards to live up to, and we all need them, like we need moral standards. And like when we talk about men sort of giving a pass to feminism, don't give a pass to all moral standards because they're really important. Look for moral standards that have clear defined goals. And look for people who will tell you when you have an issue with violating their boundaries, but won't hold it against you. They'll say, you know, this bothers me, and if you correct it, that's the end of it. They're not using it as a perpetual battering ram to try to break down your self-esteem. So, like I said, look for clear boundaries, look for clear rules, so that you know that when you are actually engaging in being a better person, you know it because you have those clear explanation, that clear step. One of the things that I have a problem with feminism is it doesn't give men any clear understanding. How do you end your patriarchal privilege? How do you not do patriarch? It's all this amorphous sin that you're just supposed to constantly live under guilt. You're supposed to build up this reservoir of guilt that a feminist can tap in at any time to make you do stuff. And that's ridiculous. It's a tool of control. It's not a standard of responsibility and behavior.
If you focus on nothing but deconstruction and not any construction to replace it, then all you're going to be surrounded with in the end is a pile of rubble and nobody knowing what the heck they're going to do.
Yeah, and the difference between a standard of behavior is at the ultimate end of the day, it isn't other people that are going to judge you by it. It's you. You have to live with yourself. You have to look in the mirror and live with yourself and in your choices.
For sure.
But that's all I wanted to have to say. I know we got a bunch of super chats that we probably should attend to.
Yes, I will start going through these. So the first one that we got tonight was from Frank Tomio, who gave us $10 Canadian. Thank you very much. CBC should be blown up for promoting all the garbage they do. I mean, maybe figuratively blown up. I don't think that anybody should actually be blown up, but, you know, honestly, I know the CBC has said some right garbage. I know I've made my own videos on criticizing
blown
their
up
garbage.
With glitter bombs.
Exactly, there we go. That would just be so satisfying. They could get it in their coffee and then they can just piss right off. So the next one was Joey Jojo, who gave us $5 and said, a woman at work said incel men should have bombs strapped to them and sent to Syria. This was a normie woman. I am so glad a woman finds me desirable. There's a lot to unpack in that statement. honestly, the person who said that sort of thing, they are completely devoid of empathy. That is exactly the sort of person that I would really like you all to try and avoid as much as possible. Somebody like that, you know, if I were cruising for a soul to eat in the morning, I would not be able to find one in somebody who says something like that. So just, you know, avoid people like that, because like that is such a toxic thing to say. Like, who says something like that? But at the same time, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that on the other hand, what we're also not really, I guess, haven't brought up specifically is that some incels sure are men who are not, have not been blessed in the looks department or the wealth department, or in some way they are an unfit mate, they're sick, they're whatever. So yeah, those exist for sure. But also we gotta realize that a tremendous amount of incels are attractive, autistic boys. There are a tremendous amount of boys who, when they're attractive, when they're younger, they get picked on by girls. Girls have this thing of like, I'm not going to tell him that I like him, and I'm not going to pick on him instead. I mean, me personally, when I was a little girl, I kicked and physically abused a boy that I liked the most. Like, that legit happened. So, I mean, and also when you're pretty, when you're attractive, other girls feel like, well, he's just all that. He thinks that he's just awesome because everybody's telling him how pretty he is. Well, guess what? They're not. Everybody's thinking that, and nobody is actually telling him anything. And all he's getting is rejection from people who think that he's too full of himself. And then you have autistic boys who have absolutely no clue about body language. That is, might as well be Martian to them. And so we have a tremendous amount of attractive, intelligent, the people who are freaking building our civilization, who do not get laid. And you want to send them to Syria? You fucking idiot.
Yeah, it's just a really terrible thing to say, and you don't know you don't know anything about these men. Like, you were already going through a couple of things, but what about if these attractive men like grew up in abusive households and they didn't have a realistic, reasonable like relationship between a mother and father, for example, to model themselves after? What if they grew up in a single mother household? That mother maybe possibly happened to be an alcoholic or abusive. Like, just for examples, imagine how somebody must feel growing up in that kind of situation with no positive models to base their life off of. How can you then expect them to know intuitively how to have that kind of relationship with somebody else? And where's the empathy for people who have gone through things like that?
I just want to say, I mean, it could be possible that she's just reacting to a horrendous situation, and because there's a lot of group blame being put on incels by the media. Yeah. However, the only way you would know is if you actually sat her down and explained what incel means and what the community is, and the fact that, you know, it's not a community where they're actually advocating an ideology that leads to violence. And somebody in the chat says, isn't that what Muslim societies are doing to their men? Sorta. At least the radicalized ones.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and of course there's always that that kind of promise that this is what like God wants you to do, or like this is, you will be rewarded in the afterlife. There are differences to it, but it's still a really terrible situation. And I mean, nobody should make generalizations about that. It's just a really terrible thing to do. But I'm just gonna kind of continue on here. Jojo, I'm also glad that you have kind of found somebody and that you're doing better. Like that's just excellent news. So good for you. Keep on keeping on. And the next one is Hoki Bukisa gave us $2 and said, redistribution of wealth, French honey badger. So we know when that came up, and I was expecting that, and that's great.
Oh, but it wasn't actually a telegram from an Ancapistan. It was a telegram from Hokikistan on behalf of Ancapistan.
There we go.
And the Ancapistan, when we talk about Ancapistan, there's just an anarcho-capitalist. French honey badger is an anarcho-capitalist, and he sends us a lot of telegrams. So that's the in joke.
Yes,
just explaining it.
Okay,
continue.
No, that's good, because I completely glossed over that, and we might have a different audience. So thank you. Okay, so Master Rogue gave us $20, and thank you very much for that. And he said, I'm pretty sure I count as an incel. I can't find a way out because I'm bad at body language, so I don't know what to do. The loneliness has always gotten to me and was the original reason for my suicidalness. And I mean, and so many people are going through that same kind of thing. And the loneliness is a really key issue, and especially like if you've got like mental health issues that you're dealing with, or you just don't have the right models, or you just have a lack of experience. There are so many different things that could kind of contribute to this, and so many people these days are just lacking any empathy for that. They say, oh, if you can't find something, it's your fault. And if you can't find something and you have the audacity to want a kind of relationship with somebody else, then all of a sudden that makes you entitled rather than a normal human being who just wants a social relationship like all other freaking human beings want. It drives me nuts. And the fact that people are jumping on this bandwagon where it's totally okay to just be awful to guys who are in your position, it breaks my heart. And I wish I wish for nothing else for people to find their humanity, find some compassion for people, and kind of get some understanding. And then maybe at that point, then we can kind of deal a little bit with the anger. We can help people to feel like they're a little more connected with the rest of society. I know that's a little bit ambitious perhaps, but that is my hope eventually. I hope that people can find some empathy for what people are going through and just realize that they're just like everybody else. They just want that human connection. They're not monsters. They're just normal people. And rant. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that.
No, only that I'm sorry to hear that, Master Rogue, and I do hope that you are taking some, that the Discord, because I know you're part of the Discord, and we've talked extensively with you on the Discord. I hope you can take something from that and know that you are valued.
Absolutely. And, you're always welcome to talk to me as well. Like, I know we've kind of talked a few times, so I'm just glad that we can kind of offer you that sort of support. So you always have a place to go to. So the next one is Joey Jojo again, gave us $5 and said 30 years of loneliness and 15 years skin hunger. That might have been a typo or a autocorrect or something. I almost took my own life because of it. I felt empty and cold inside. Being incel eats away at you. Totally. Like, I completely empathize, because again, we were talking about this earlier. Like, it's a human need to have that kind of contact with somebody, and having that many years without it really does something to you. Okay, I'll just continue on.
Sorry, I was yeah, I can't I think what he means by skin hunger is
touch deprivation. Okay, he just clarified
deprivation.
in the okay, got it. That makes sense. Yeah, and yeah, like I totally get it. Like if you're without human contact for a while, it can really mess with you. Like I had a period in high school, the period where I was experiencing the bullying, where I was very isolated too. And even though it was for a relatively short time, like I know what that felt like. And to imagine extending that for like a decade, I can't even imagine what that must feel like. And like clearly the rest of society can't imagine either, because otherwise they'd be able to empathize with it. But moving on. Fergus, okay, really? Dubshlane? That, I don't know. I hope that's okay. I'm sorry. I could not pronounce that. Gave us $10 and said, I have always had trouble with reading body language, confusing it with gaslighting and with my own disabilities. I have had women tell me that if I would stop faking being disabled, I might be attractive. What a horrible thing for somebody to say. Like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know what to say to that. Like that's just the worst thing ever. Like, faking being disabled, like as if they know what you're going through on the inside, as if they know anything about you. They're just like, no, you should just change yourself to be what I want, and then it would be perfect. Like, who says something like that? That one actually made me mad. I'm sorry that you went through that, and I hope that you're surrounding yourself now with people who are less horrible, I guess, is just the basic way to say it. I don't know if you guys have anything you'd like to add to that one.
I don't know if there really is anything to add to it. Yeah, that's pretty unpleasant. The thing is that how would they know if you're faking being disabled? Like, and what business is it of theirs?
Exactly. Like that's just ridiculous. The fact that anybody would say that, it's just beyond the pale.
I mean, if they have some concrete information about how you're presenting yourself, that you think about it and you're like, yeah, maybe I could improve that. Fair enough. But that doesn't sound really like that sounds much more like a condemnation of you as a person than giving you, like, as I said before, clear and concrete goals and standards. So ignore it.
Definitely.
Fart in their general direction.
There we go.
Obviously, their fathers smelled of elderberries, and their mothers were hamsters.
Yes. All right. So the next one is Hoki Bukisa. Again, gave us 420. Approved emotion veneration. There you have it. That's exactly what they want. It's like, just worship the women, and then you will be good, and that is the appropriate emotion for you to be expressing. Okay, and then Jonathan, it's either Rosler or Rossler, sorry, gave us $5 and said, this conversation hit home for me. I'm still deathly afraid to actually talk about any problem I have from fear of being seen as whiny. And that's exactly one of the problems that we were kind of talking about tonight. They say, oh, men should feel comfortable expressing their emotions. But then anytime any man expresses their emotions in a way that maybe they don't like, or maybe they see as too harsh, or they're like, oh no, you shouldn't express your anger like that. You should express it in the designated appropriate way that we see fit. Otherwise, you're a misogynist, or you're a whiny man baby who lives in his mother's basement. It's ridiculous. They're so focused on tone policing that they don't actually seem to really care about how you actually feel, and you getting these emotions out and expressing your feelings, venting your problems, so that you might actually be able to find somebody who can empathize with you, so that you can talk it out and work yourself through it. It just speaks to a really fundamental lack of understanding of others, and I just really don't understand. But there was one more super chat. Lack of Empathy T gave us $5 and said, I want to start an HBR group in Alabama. Any advice and or warnings? Also, long live the Emperor. Allison, you feel like fielding this one?
Well, an HBR group in Alabama. I would say that might be maybe start with a meetup. We have, I know this might not work for you because it's in our patron Discord, but we have a meetup channel, and people have actually met up through the patron Discord. And so that consider starting a meetup. And if you do, I would be happy to publicize it. And you can see if people join up and you guys can talk. That's what I would start with just a singular meetup. Select a location. You might, for the first meetup, you might not want to actually make arrangements with the location because they may have issues with it. And it's not really their business if a bunch of people have a friendly drink in an establishment or something. So I would suggest trying a meetup. Start small and work your way up. Groups can be really difficult to maintain, so I would start with, like I said, a meetup. And if you do want to do that, just send a message to topic@badgerpod.com, and I'll be sure to publicize it for you.
Perfect.
So that's the way I would do it.
There
I
you
think we're done
go.
with the super chats.
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, do you guys have anything that you kind of want to add at the end here?
I'd like to ask anybody who's listening, in the comments, comment on what we've talked about. Maybe ask some questions. Maybe give some suggestions for future shows on this topic on men's mental health and health in general. So that's what I would like to throw out there.
Yeah, because I think we'll be winding up posting this on the Badger live streams channel after this is all said and done, right? Or are we?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
There we go. So yeah, you'll be able to find that on that channel, and we're eagerly looking for discussion on this topic. We're just happy to hear from you. It's really important that people have an avenue to be able to talk about these things, because I know that a lot of places are kind of unaccepting of that, but like we heavily encourage it on this in the comments in this video. So definitely do that. And yeah, so Anna, did you have anything that you wanted to say before we close out?
Well, you guys got it wrapped up pretty nicely. I just want to send all the hearts out, and just went to a wedding here recently, and even though it was all, not necessarily our cup of tea in terms of the particular religion that they participated in, etc., I really did appreciate what the dad said of the bride during the toast. And he said, "Oh, what is it? What do you start with? Faith, love, and hope is what's important." And being not specifically religious myself in any way, I still believe that those three are insanely important for your mental health, the way you treat others around you, and honestly, be the change you want to see in the world. So I know it's really hard. I know you're very angry. I know it hurts a lot. But if you just try to see them, the people who may not empathize or may not understand or may have their own fucked up ideas, just try to see them as little broken machines, as animals that are just running around trying to make the best sense of their world that they can, and falling into poop and mud and splashing it all over you. And just try to have some patience for them in that sense. Try to see them as children, as learning, as fallible, as ultimately forgivable and lovable, because we're all one.
Yeah, and it also, that trying to maintain that mentality helps to negate a lot of their negativity, so you don't take it on. So it's good for your own mental health too. I just wanted to say, I'm going to do a brief shill. If you're interested in joining a very, very supportive community and improving aspects of your mental health, I recommend becoming a patron. www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. It's per episode on Patreon, and if you prefer a monthly option, www.feedthebadger.com. What myself and Prim is also assisting in this, what we're trying to do is put together an extremely supportive community and use the power of the pack. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the dog whisperer, but the power of the pack to try to help people get over their mental health issues and start to develop the skills to heal themselves and heal each other. So once again, if you're interested in that kind of a thing, please do consider becoming a patron and availing yourself of a supportive community that is focused on helping people's mental health. And we've had people come through our doors and they've managed to improve their educational prospects, their job prospects, their relationship prospects. So I recommend it. I actually really appreciate the community. I found it myself very supportive. And if Prim wants to say anything on that score, I don't know, and let us out.
Absolutely.
I'll step off the soapbox.
All right, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. Like it is such a supportive community. I've done my best to support others and they've done their best to support me, and it's a very mutual sort of thing. So like don't think of this as some sort of, we've got this like closed off little community. No, it's a wonderful supportive community. So I do wholly recommend it. But in the meantime, I wish for the best for all of you. Like Anna said, try and see the best in others. Like, stay optimistic. Don't be hesitant to express your feelings. Don't let anybody else tell you how you ought to express your feelings. But try to see the best in the world. Try to see the best in yourself. Work to improve yourself in the ways that you see fit, not that others demand from you. And I guess that's really about it. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and thank my co-hosts for joining me. This was a really, really great discussion, and thank you all so much for listening. Again, post in the comments, have that discussion with us, and for now, I guess I'll say good night.